TIFU by calling for a welfare check on my neighbor. Well, I just set myself up for a good bollocking by my neighbor. My partner, 41F, and I, 41M, haven't seen our neighbor for 6 weeks. She lives alone, 60s, suffers from emphysema, really bad but not bedridden, and is only ever at home. In the 8 years we've been here, I don't think she's ever been on holiday. We see her on our camera every other day going to her bin, or pruning her garden, or we see her lights on when we go for a walk, leave the house. But lately, nothing. A couple of weeks back I knocked on the door to check. No answer. My partner has been telling me to call the police, but I've been reluctant because I know she is Indian and may have gone to see family abroad. Well, today I bit the bullet and asked for a welfare check by the police. They tell me to knock on the door again. Nothing. Shout through the letterbox. Nothing. Look through the window. Curtains open. Lights off. Can see through the kitchen, nobody there. They ask for her name. I don't know it. I just know she has a daughter who lives away and rarely comes to visit. She gets her shopping delivered, but that's not happened since before we noticed. They say they'll reach out to the hospital to see if they have details and would send someone around. Well, I hang up and leave it at that. I don't expect anything done that day. Midnight I get a knock on the door. My partner and I are night owls anyway, so that's fine. Clearly, it's the police. I tell them again about the scenario. Tell them she has a daughter. I send them on their merry way, and I assume they would reach out to the next of kin to find out about her. Nope. 30 minutes later, they came back and all I hear is a loud boom in my house, which is detached, was practically shaking from the deep banging of their doorbuster. Now I hear it 6 times and I say to the wife, "Oh no. It's starting now?" My other neighbors have kids, so I knew this was gonna wake them up. Another 6 times I hear it, and we are wondering why the hell is the house shaking so much. I look out the window and the neighbors' lights are on. Great. Here's some explaining to the neighbors for tomorrow, I tell my wife. Another 6 booms, sounds like they are struggling. Another 6 booms, they could go out the back. After a small pause, I think they are in. I check the back window and see a police officer around the back. They have been hammering the gate that is on my house. Now I have to check tomorrow if they have damaged my house because that gate is not in gate shape. So by now, my neighbor is coming to check what's going on. And 2 other neighbors also. So I decided to go out and talk with them and the police officer that is telling them what's going on. They are still banging. It must be in the 2030 minutes of bangs by now. The guy is looking tired and he's passing it to his buddy, who is also looking like he's had better days. The police officer told us anything could have happened. So I was right to call. I said, "I wasn't expecting you to start knocking the door down at 1 a.m. And she stated they had to, as they couldn't leave the scene unchecked. Anyone could be inside. We just don't know. So they keep banging on the front door because the rear entrance to the house is a conservatory and breaking the door would likely damage the structure. They are there for ages. This door is the Goliath of doors. It's not moving." After another 5 minutes of banging, we all got bored and went back to our homes. After another 5 minutes of banging, and the 2 boys from 2 of the houses went out to look again. Then silence. Looks like they have gotten in, I tell the wife as I look out the window. I decide to go out the front again and check. Yep. They are in. Torches going around room to room. And I suddenly realize they wouldn't be looking in all the rooms if there was a body. She's not in the house. She's gone on holiday. She's gonna kick my $1. Quote. The police officer comes out, "Well, she's not in. $K, I think. Because now I know what's going to happen. Old emphysema lady is on a lovely holiday seeing friends and family and her good-for-nothing neighbor has ruined it all and she can't even get into her own home. She'll return at 1 a.m. to a house she can't enter. Okay, so what are the next steps? I ask. Well, we'll board up the door and the gate. We'll put a note that we've been here and for her to reach out. Okay, but what about the damage? I ask, hoping it's going to be covered or I'm gonna get it. Yeah, we'll cover that. She just needs to call us. Well, that's a relief, but she's not getting a door until after she thinks she's been robbed. Okay, I say. And then the police officer hits me with the kicker. Yeah, we'll try and reach out to her next of kin to see if they have seen her or know where she is. So now I am thinking either they didn't bother reaching out to next of kin or they couldn't get hold of them. Either way, I've got a lot of explaining to do. TLDR, I have not seen my neighbor in 6 weeks, so called the police to break down her door. Turns out she's just not home. Update 1. A nice Redditor suggested I offer our guest room for a night. I have spoken with my partner and when she comes back we'll put her in a hotel for a couple of days while the door is repaired. I knew 2 old widows who lived next to each other. They each hung a sign on their window shade that said something like, "Good night," and pulled it down before bed, then raised it back up in the morning. Of all the stories I've read on this website, that sure was one of them. Don't feel bad. Basically the same premise happened with my late 60s. Disabled. Lives alone. Family never visits neighbor. Turns out he did die. So the sentiment isn't misplaced. We have to look out for those that have it harder. The inverse of this story is, you didn't do anything until the smell permeated your home. And she was actually dead. So all in all, this is the best outcome. Why would they not call a locksmith? Insane. I had to enter the mother-in-law's house as she didn't pick up the phone all morning from the sister-in-law. Both sisters were worried sick. I told the wife, you stay home until I give you the all clear. No answer from door knock or phone. I entered and yelled her name and she answered and came out after a few minutes, and I explained everything, and her phone was not plugged in. She did have an underlying medical concern, so there was real reason to fear. You did the right thing. I hope she truly is out on holiday versus anything worse. Yeah, she'll be pissed about the door, but whatever. You're a good human. Don't change. Jesus, you'd think they'd be around thieves enough to pick up a few basic breaking and entering skills. I'd be upset about the door, but sort of thankful that someone was worried about me. Who knows how emphysema lady will respond. Best wishes. Please update this when the neighbor comes back from holiday. Would like to know their reaction. Hope they are okay. This is not a TIFU. You are being a very thoughtful and caring neighbor. I wish more people were like you. And good on the cops for saying they'd pay for the damages. I was expecting them to shrug their shoulders and say it's the neighbor's problem. Yeah, I'll chime in with not a foo. Back in October of 2020, one of my uncles called and asked if I had heard from another of my uncles recently. I thought for a moment, and it had been a couple of weeks. My uncle said he'd been trying to get a hold of him for a few days, but hadn't gotten a reply. This other uncle was prone to taking spontaneous road trips, so our first thought was maybe he went camping or something. But he also would usually tell someone or post on Facebook. We planned to go drive down and check on him the next day. He lived by himself on 15 acres, about an hour away. But something didn't sit right with us after we planned to go the next day. So we decided to head down around lunchtime. A couple of years earlier, a tornado had passed directly by his place. As in so close we could see his place in the distance on the news coverage of a church that got hit. We tried at that time to get a welfare check done by the authorities but could never get connected with the right office. We tried calling and calling him but no answer. So my uncle and I drive down to check. And on the way down he finally responded. He had been at the library and wasn't aware of the tornado at all. My mom happened to be visiting me, so she joined us on the check of her brother. We get to the turn to his place, and we see both of his vehicles. Not a good sign. We pull in, and don't see his golf cart he used to drive around his land. My mom and I go and start to search the land while my uncle gets into his house. We hear my uncle shout, "I found him." My first question was if he was alive and he responded, "Barely." I go into the house, and he had collapsed on the floor next to his bed. He was almost completely unresponsive. I call 911 and they arrived quicker than I expected, but it still seemed like an eternity. It was chaotic trying to answer questions about him like age, medical history, etc. While looking for his prescriptions, I found his cell phone in the pocket of his shirt 10 feet or so away from where we found him. He had unanswered voicemails from 5 days prior, so he could have been on the floor that long, and if was coherent could hear the ringing but not be able to get to his phone. They got him to the hospital and ran tons of tests. COVID was ruled out, as was a heart attack or stroke. They eventually got him stabilized, but he never did recover. He did end up getting COVID at the long-term care place. He was diagnosed the day after I visited him, and I ended up testing positive a week later. He eventually passed away in November of 2021, a little over a year after the incident. There never was a reason found for what caused it. The TLDR is in my book. Err on the side of caution if something doesn't seem right. I didn't call a welfare check. And 2, maybe 1 days later my neighbor overdosed on pain pills while her husband was in the hospital with pneumonia. How is it that these chaps have a 50-pound door buster but don't have an electric lockpick? It's never a fool to be concerned about someone. You did the right thing. My husband just had a coworker, no family, didn't get out much, pass away. They only found out because one of his coworkers realized he hadn't been active in almost 3 weeks. Not sure how the cops got in. Probably maintenance man with a key. I think someone said he lived in an apartment. But wow. You write like an Irishman. You did the right thing. I'm surprised your neighbor didn't tell you she was going away. Especially as she never goes anywhere, it would be logical to let friendly neighbors know you'll be gone. Not to worry. And to keep an eye on the house, etc. I'll tell you a story to make you feel better. My mom and dad lived in a house when they'd first got married and had an elderly neighbor. And all the neighbors would keep an eye out on him. They'd see that he opened his curtains every morning, or bought the milk in, etc. One day the curtains were still closed and I think milk on the doorstep. They tried knocking but no answer. They got a ladder to an upstairs window and I think it must have been open. But either way my dad climbed in and the man was unconscious and either barely breathing or not breathing. They called an ambulance and my dad had to do CPR till they arrived. The man made it to hospital and survived a day I think, and his family were able to get to the hospital to see him before he passed away shortly after. The family thanked my dad for checking on him and doing CPR to try and save him. And they were grateful he survived long enough for them to see him and say goodbye. And that he wasn't alone, etc. Good people always look out for their neighbors. We've had neighbors we've checked up on. And we feed each other's pets and keep an eye on the house. Another situation was when one of our neighbors was away. My mom was going to bed. And as she was walking upstairs, she could see our neighbor's front door through the window at the bottom of the stairs, and the front door was open. She knew they were away. So she called 111 and they sent someone round to check in case of a break-in. Thankfully it turned out nothing wrong. A neighbor who was feeding the fish hadn't pulled the handle up properly or something when she closed the door. But the fact is we noticed something wrong. Got the police. Notified them and their kids who lived locally so they could come and check no valuables missing, etc. It's what neighbors do for each other. If something had happened to your neighbor, and she was laying collapsed on the floor needing help, or even dead, and nobody checked on her for a few weeks and just assumed she must be on holiday, you'd feel awful if you find out weeks later she was dead on the floor and nobody checked on her. For anyone living alone, or elderly, it's important to keep an eye out for their regular movements to spot if anything's wrong. And it's good to have an emergency contact number of a family member should anything bad happen too. And unless you don't get on with each other, it would be sensible for them to let someone know if they're going to be away unexpectedly. I'm 40 years old and disabled, and sometimes I fall asleep on the sofa with my light on in the lounge. And if my neighbor sees it on when he goes to work in the morning, he's messaged me in the past to check I'm okay. I have mobility issues due to chronic pain. It's nice knowing someone's looking out for you. What I'd suggest you do is pop an additional note on her door and tell her to come and knock your door when she arrives home. And if you can, let her stay the night till they can replace the door. Or see if another neighbor has a spare bed she can stay in till they replace the door. It should be done the same day I'd assume. But she'd have to ring up and get them out, so depending on what time she arrives home, just tell her to knock or call you and she can stay the night, maybe two, till the door's repaired. I'm sure she'll be touched by the kindness of checking in on her even though it's inconvenient her door got smashed. And it will make her think about letting you know next time she's away. And giving you an emergency contact number or a spare key. Lol. I think you are a caring person and I felt really good about your story. Although the door thing is kind of sad. I'm a senior and I'm fortunate to have my husband here. But I do know people who live alone and are by choice or environment alone. I feel good that someone might notice if we aren't up to our normal habits and check on us. I don't personally care about the dang door. You have good instincts and you did the right things. Hope all is well with her. So proud of you, young man. Usually they don't break your door down for welfare checks. I think they can only do that in an emergency. A welfare check is not an emergency. Odd. My mom's condo neighbor reported her as unseen. She was on a cruise with me, and police used a locksmith to enter her condo. They went through her address book and started calling people with the same surname. The one who told them where she was my dad, her ex-husband of many years. They also called my niece, my nephew and my sister-in-law. It was my brother who got a hold of me to say she was reported missing. I was given the officer who caught her case's number. And when we were back he arranged to get her new keys to her. She wasn't even given a locksmith bill. Must know the brand of door, lol. I live in a block of 4 flats. 2 ground floor and 2 first floor. Older lady lives alone in on upstairs. Not directly above me but across, so I'd never hear her moving around. Any post delivered is left on stairs for the 2 flats. Her post is usually collected every day, except this one week. Left for 3 days. Gets to Friday and I'm imagining her lying on the floor in pain. I know she has relatives nearby but no contact details. So I phoned the management company. Finally convinced the receptionist that we should investigate and not leave it until Monday. The boss come out with master keys. We go in and place is empty. Turns out she'd gone to stay at her brother's house for a few days.
If you enjoyed this video, please check out our playlists full of similar content. Epicaricast is like doom scrolling for your ears. Please like, share, and subscribe.